Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished marketer, a senior corporate leader, talking to us from Gurgaon, India, Vitika Banerjee. Vitika, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh, and I'm delighted to be on this video podcast, and it's my honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Vitika is the founder of Fourth Dimension and Experience. She's also the co-founder of Future Fit LLP, but she's a passionate entrepreneur and a startup evangelist, a lifelong observer of human behavior. Vitika has worked with Hindustan Unilever, Avon Cosmetics, Philips, Dabur, and Aircel. And given the amazing work he has done, she's been recognized, awarded, and felicitated several times. So, Vitika, let me first ask you a question. Tell me about your own journey and what inspired you to transition from working with large MNCs to founding your own brand strategy firm.
Well, Ashutosh, let me start from the start, really. See, I was born to middle-class parents, but working parents. So my dad was in civil services. My mom was a high school teacher. And, as a civil servant, I have sort of lived in, I think, multiple cities. It's unimaginable for children today, but I have actually studied in 9 schools out of the 14 years of education. So from the beginning, I think, even living in these government colonies, which were and today are really the microcosm of India, because you would have people from every walk of life, every state of the country, lots of diverse socioeconomic, segments. And very early in my career, in my life, I think, I grew up in that environment where the curiosity, the fearlessness, the curiosity of, wanting to know what next, and the fearlessness of getting into a new place, and, not having any inhibitions to make my own presence felt, because every 2 years we were moving, and we were moving to a new place, we were moving to a new school. So that has really, I think, looking back, really shaped also my career in adulthood. I started with sales and sales in FMCG, which was in my time very rare to have women in sales at that time. But it was also my curiosity to, learn what people would have not have sort of intuitively or naturally given me a role as. So I pushed to get into sales. There was a sense of, wanting to learn and learn more. Worked with very different kind of people, as you can imagine, in sales. People younger than me, people older than me, reporting into me. A lot of people I would have to get work done who did not have formal reporting relationships. So, over the years, I think that has what has shaped my career. And at 40, when I, joined TPG as the Chief Marketing Officer to take care of their retail business with Vishal Megamart, I think I reached a stage where I started feeling that I am probably not being, the 9 to 5 sort of restricted scope of my work life was not extracting enough from me, not as much as I had to give,
Right.
So I think my reason for moving from a corporate structure into a more flexible, more, I would say, more diverse and more fuller role as a consultant was really to be able to do much more than what was asked of me in a 9 to 5 role.
Absolutely.
So it was a natural, I would say, progression for me.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't seem intuitive, but for me, it was pretty natural.
No, you're absolutely right. And, the early part of your introduction about, moving from one place to the other, the civil services. My father was in the army, so I can understand exactly what you are saying, moving from multiple cities. And that had a major impact on all of us who have moved like that. But let's now move to branding and marketing. which is an area of your expertise. Let me start by asking you a question. What are the essential elements of a robust brand strategy?
Well, I've been fortunate to have been schooled in the universities of marketing with Dabur in India and Unilever, which is an international considered school of marketing. But not going to the theoretical aspect, I think now working with a lot of startup businesses and small and medium enterprise businesses where people don't really understand marketing. I've arrived at a very simplistic marketing strategy, or how would you define that? So for me, I think it's about answering two questions. Who am I as a brand?
Right.
And why by me?
Hmm.
And if we start to seek to answer these two questions, it will encompass all elements of the brand strategy. So when you start asking, who am I? Then you want to define, what is this brand going to be about? What is the need that it is going to service? What is the problem it is solving? So that takes care of the insight. You're tapping into a consumer insight to address an opportunity. It also tells you which kind of consumer are you going to talk about? Are you going to address the problem for? It will also then start defining for you, if that is the problem you're going to solve for this consumer, then this is the competition you're going to be up against. So the competitive set, the insight, the target audience, all of those elements are encompassed in the question, who am I? And also, I think, the essence of the brand will come through when you start answering this. When you come to answering the question, why by me, then you will start defining what is the benefit that you're going to offer.
Correct.
So we are talking about rational and emotional benefits. How is it, how is your brand going to be different from every other brand so that people will come and buy you? Why should they buy you? Why should they believe you? The whole idea of the reason to believe, the discriminator, the differentiation of the brand is all in this question, answering this question, why by me? It's also then you start defining yourself as what's the kind of values that you want to bring to the consumer as a brand, what kind of personality, what kind of communication you are going to use to attract the consumer and get them to buy you. So for me, it's just about answering these two questions.
Very well said. And I love how so simply you put down who am I and why me. Great response for a brand. But moving on, Vitika, how has the landscape of marketing or branding evolved over the last 3 decades, especially with the introduction of digital media and all kinds of technologies?
Well, our generation has seen that transition from traditional legacy brands, traditional communication, to now, marketing in the digital media. And I think I would say there are 4 big changes that have happened. Starting with the first that I think it's the most important, is the brand which used to be a brand owner's brand or a brand marketer's brand. Today, that ownership has shifted from marketing to consumer.
Correct.
So brands are today owned by consumers. They are no longer owned by marketing companies or promoters. The other thing is that it's 24/7 on. So the speed of response in today's world, in today's digital world, where we are on social media all the time, brands have to be on social media and they have to be responsive. So it's 24/7, which it wasn't. If you shut off the TV in the earlier times, your interaction with the consumers was over because it was a one-way communication. Right. The other thing that I think has really been a game changer is this whole idea of disintegration of barriers for new businesses, for new brand launches. So when I say that, what I mean is in the traditional, about even 15, 20 years ago, entry into the market by a new brand had huge barriers of distribution because fulfillment of products and services was, physical. But today, the fulfillment of services and fulfillment of a brand interaction and brand experience is no more a barrier because of the digital media. So anybody can come in, they can create a presence. The fulfillment, there are multiple opportunities. You can do it offline, you can do it online, you can create an omni-channel ecosystem. So those barriers have really disintegrated. And as a result, what has happened is, if you take any category, even if it is, say, a shampoo, today you have more than 100 brands that you can choose from, or you can explore, which didn't happen because you had only shops.
Very interesting.
And all that, what is sort of putting all of this together, or what is really holding all of this together, is this access to data. The data that is being created, the data that is being generated, and the data that is available for marketers and available for brands to access, to make their strategies sharper, to create their experiences more differentiated. That is what has been the game changer. So, four things.
Fascinating. And Vitika, how important is storytelling when it comes to branding and marketing? And what makes a compelling brand story?
I think as the clutter grows, like I said, when barriers are no more there and there are new entrants every day, it becomes even more important for a brand to have a compelling story. And storytelling was always there. It's not that, we had a 60-seconder and a 30-seconder telling the brand story. But today, I think consumers are wanting to establish a relationship with the brand. It's not just consuming a one-way communication. They want to know, where did the brand come from? Who is the owner? Who's the brand promoter? If you look at any new brands that have touched your lives, you will see that there is the whole brand narrative around its origin. And it starts from that origin, talks about who's the promoter, what is their life story, goes on to talk about, what is it that they're doing. And storytelling becomes important because brands now have to talk to consumers like people.
Right.
So it's really not just a transaction anymore. It's a relationship. And when there are relationships, then you need to be emotionally engaging your audience. And for that, storytelling is a fantastic medium to really get your message through. The best way to create compelling stories is to be authentic.
Correct.
To be real. Don't fake it, because you can't live up to it. So brands have to be real. Brands have to be stemmed into their personal. So brand owners have to talk from their own personal experiences to be able to create stories that people will trust and people will engage with and feel the emotional hook from. So an example is, I keep talking about how Dipinder Goyal has created his narrative around his brand Zomato. The latest was this whole, they celebrated their anniversary, 16th year anniversary, and Dipinder was on the front cover of newspapers, if you remember, last week. So it's very, very closely entwined with the origin, the source credentials, the promoter, and I think that's what is what will make it compelling.
Absolutely. So one more question related to branding, marketing, and then I want to move to fitness and well-being. Vitika, a large number of our viewers and listeners are also startup entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs. My question to you is, what advice would you give to startups looking to establish a strong brand presence?
Again, I will come back to authenticity. So, brand presence is no longer just a function of how much money you put behind it. Yes, it has a bearing on that, but it's not necessary that a brand that has spending more money will get more presence, because it's about building relationships. So if you're talking from a point of authenticity, if you're talking from a point of ingenuity, then those are stories that will attract consumers. Brand presence, also a large part of presence is also should be created by making sure that whatever you say, you're consistent at every touch point. So today, the brands, consumers are not interacting with brands in one media. There's not just TV or press.
Right.
They are interacting with brands on online, on social, on ground. They may interact with them at some events. There is, of course, OTT, TV,
Yeah.
press, radio, but also in conversations in communities. So today it's not just about audiovisual media, it's also about how people are talking, what communities you're part of, how those communities are reacting to those brands. And there is again, with so much clutter, people are looking for trusted testimonials, trusted endorsements. That's the reason for the rise of influencers. So for startups, it really depends on how much money they have, what's the kind of resources. But more than the money, it's about how you want to build your brand. What do you want to stand for? How will you build that presence and keep it consistent and real in all the touch points that the brand interacts with their target audience?
Great response. Thank you. So, Vitika, now let's move to the other entrepreneurship role that you are now building, which is Future Fit LLP, and you're focusing on the fitness and well-being in school-going children.
Yes.
Tell me about what was the inspiration to found or co-found Future Fit LLP, and what are the primary objectives?
So, like I said, this is really from my personal experience and personal need. As a child, I have always been what initially people used to call healthy, right? So I've always been a little overweight, although I have been very active in sports. But I have always had this fear that, my children should not have, with me having the tendency to put on weight. I was always fearful that my kids should not be in a situation in this, urban lifestyle to get into sedentary life and start putting on weight. And I think that fear for urban parents is pretty universal, because children are tied to their devices, they are tied to the lifestyle that we have. We hardly, in a normal day, we hardly walk if there is no need. We're transporting ourselves everywhere by car or, so this fear is what started me thinking when I realized that for my children, if they don't want to, if they're not passionate about a formal sport, then how do they keep themselves physically fit?
Correct.
And we also, this is a time when in 2016, when Delhi was going through huge problems of pollution. If you remember, we had just started experiencing that, very bad air, which people couldn't,
Breathe in.
children, schools had started giving holidays because of pollution. And we had not been trained in staying at home by then, because COVID had not come in by then. So having kids at home, staying at home because schools have given a holiday, there was no online school at that time. It was a big problem. Where do we take the children? How do we keep them fit? Children can't go to gyms, and I have two girls and a girl child in Delhi. I can't just, send them to run on the roads, because as a parent, safety issues are always foremost.
Absolutely.
So that's what started me and a friend of mine who also has two boys. I have two girls. We are almost the same age. And we started thinking, what can we do to make sure that we create a safe, hygienic, weather controlled space where children of parents like ours, when mothers are working, can actually go and make sure that they are getting their daily dose of fitness. And they're not worried about, parents are not worried about them putting on weight. There is a structured physical fitness program that they can go through.
Very interesting.
So that's how it started, really.
Fascinating, fascinating. And when I was reading about you and preparing for my conversation, I was also very interested to learn that uh, there is an impact of early childhood fitness on long-term health and well-being. Tell me a little bit more about this.
Well, Ashutosh, I don't know whether you know, today India is has the second largest number of obese children in the world.
Yeah.
And it is alarming because these children and childhood, the obese children are going to become obese adults. And obese adults are going to have diabetes, they're going to have health problems. You can imagine the burden on healthcare and healthcare on the GDP that we are staring. It's staring us in the face. That's the next, I would say, the next epidemic that's about to burst. So it's really important that children today are introduced to a regimen of fitness where they are put on the path of fitness, which is engaging, which is long term, which is not something like treated like a problem solution. It's a lifestyle. They can't, it's not like you go for 2 months for swimming and thode se patle ho jao, if you lose a little weight and then you stop it. No, it's not that. It's about making sure that our children are on a lifelong path of fitness, because that will ensure that as they grow in their years, they will also imbibe those habits and take them in their adulthood, make sure that they are keeping fit. They keep the burden of healthcare expenses down, they keep themselves fit for long. And with the advances in medical science, people are going to stay alive.
Yeah.
But to stay alive healthy is what should be our objective. It's not just about staying alive on all medical contraptions around you. What you want to do is have a keep playing golf, keep going for walks even when you're 90, 95, because that's the reality that's going to happen.
Absolutely.
Because they're going to keep you alive, but it's important that you keep yourself healthy. So I think it's really, really very important, although we are a very small organization, and it's our small, contribution to make sure that we are sort of looking at keeping India fit in the years to come.
Absolutely. And I see no reason why this will not grow from a small into a much larger organization. But Vitika, I have time for one more question. And that question is, what role do parents and schools play in supporting children's fitness goals through programs like Future Fit?
Well, they play a very, very important role. I think the biggest challenge that we have faced in our expansion of footprint and really getting this program to many more schools and opening many more academies has been the mindset. Today, there are very few schools in the country who actually devote their resources and their space to creating sporting infrastructure. Our schools are designed for academic education. They are not designed for a holistic education.
Correct.
And even parents, if you look at, parents, the focus is the child should be good in studies, should get very good marks in English, maths, science. Nobody really talks about whether the child should reach a level of a proficiency in a certain sport. Yes, if the child does well, they're happy, and it's a great motivator for everybody. But that's not a target for any parent.
Correct.
If you look at it's actually culturally ingrained. If you look at our old saying in Hindi, I've heard this saying. Some people say, "पढ़ेगा लिखेगा तो बनेगा नवाब, खेलेगा कूदेगा तो बनेगा खराब." So what the it says is that if your child is going
Yeah.
to study well, then he's going to do well in life.
Yeah.
And if he keeps playing, then he's really going to go wayward, right?
Yeah.
Now, that's the mindset which today, of course, urban parents are much more progressive. They are outward looking, but there's so much more to be done. And if parents can understand that the need of the child is to have an equal focus on academics and sports,
Mhm.
and if the child is physically fit, that child will actually do better in academics as well,
Mhm.
then that's going to really change the whole scene.
Mhm.
And I mean, there's lots of efforts that the government is also putting in to bring this
Yeah.
change. But I think as parents, a lot of us also need to relook at what we are prioritizing.
Mhm.
And there's enough evidence, there's enough documentary evidence to say that children who are physically fit, who are into sports, they also do better in academics, because they are more focused, they have a more discipline about their studies, and a lot of that comes into their academic regimen as well.
Well,
So yeah, that's to your question, simple answer:
absolutely. You're so
schools and
right.
parents play a very big role.
Absolutely. I think on that note, just want to say thank you so much for speaking to me about your own amazing journey. Thank you for speaking to me about so many different aspects of branding and marketing. I mean, from our viewers and listeners, Vitika's 2 points of who am I and why me are very critical, not just for uh, brands, but for whether it's a startup or even us as individuals. Thank you also for speaking to me about Future Fit LLP. I think you very clearly emphasized how important it is to have fitness as a part of every child's growing up. Thank you for speaking to me and good luck to you.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.